So, now it's the full day dedicated to macro-regional strategies and communication. Yesterday it was very much on the media scene. And I think it was a very, very good introduction, warming up, knowing what are the challenges of a today media society. Much very important messages for us to continue during our day. But before we go to the concrete topics, I have the pleasure to invite for a few words with us also the minister responsible for development and European cohesion policy of the Republic of Slovenia. Mrs. Alenka Smerkolj, please, the word is yours.
Yeah, the weather, as Mrs. Irina said, is not on our side, but I'm sure that hopefully, well, we will not have any clouds today, so hopefully people will, after the first walk in the morning, also come here and discuss this interesting and very, very, very important topic. And now the few words, official words, I need to say. First, I would really like to greet you here on behalf of the government office that I had. And yes, I'm responsible for development and cohesion policy. On the other side, I would also like to welcome you to Slovenia once again. I'm sure you heard it before, but we really are the land where outstanding landscape features of the Alpine, Dinaric karst, Pannonian and Mediterranean regions meet. And we are proud that this year's Mediterranean Coast and Macro-Regional Strategies Week is taking place here. All of us who are here today, whether representatives of countries, regions, local communities, European Commission, media, projects or civil society, each and every one of us in our rich and infinite diversity proves how important this event really is. The government office that I'm heading is responsible for implementing EU cohesion policy in Slovenia and also coordinating 13 European territorial cooperation programs. Since we are the only EU member state that has the honor of participating in 3 macro-regional strategies, we cannot do otherwise than always think in the macro-regional context. Cohesion policy plays a major role in European policies. We could rather refer to it as the policy of solidarity, since it encourages member states to show mutual solidarity and do everything they can so that their citizens live a decent life. What else is important? It's true that all member states contribute to formulation of common objectives first, and of course in the pursuit of sustainable development of all regions. And yet, too often, do we fail. Why is that so? Simply because there are still common challenges that concern only certain geographical areas which common EU policies have failed to tackle efficiently, and because some of the countries face issues that transcend national borders. This is also why the 4 macro-regional strategies covering the Baltic region, the Danube region, the Alpine region, and the hosting Adriatic-Ionian region have been designed. These 4 macro-regional strategies seek to link interdependent regions across boundaries, though through common challenges or development opportunities. I firmly believe that these strategies deliver results on the international scale, which can be proven on a daily basis. Yet, this does not mean the 4 strategies must be involved in joint projects all the time. No, rather it means that all partners in a given geographical area pursue the same goals, regardless of the cultural, economic, social, or political differences that are there not to drive us apart, but bring us together. We can argue that macro-regional strategies upgrade EU cohesion policy, particularly because they allow non-EU countries to be accepted on an equal footing as participants to the strategy, thereby contributing to the enlargement process and supporting sharing of knowledge and experience, which is why we are gathered here today. You are settling an important goal for today. You will tackle the question of how to make macro-regional strategies and sustainable challenges they are facing more visible. The purpose behind our gathering is to interact with each other and discuss the pathways to truly coordinated and efficient cooperation between all of us. You will look into ways how to best help each other for a better tomorrow. Anne Morrow Lindbergh once said that only in growth, reform, and change, true security can be found. And she was right. If you want to succeed, we need to act that way. If you want to build a strong and successful relationship with our audiences and increase our role and visibility at the same time, we need to be proactive and we have to take our work together to the next level. Visibility and recognition are what we get from investment in targeted communications, particularly when dealing with such a complex subject as macro-regional strategies. Dear all, I hope we will set up a positive and creative atmosphere, I'm sure about it, encouraging open and constructive ideas. Let me emphasize once again, it is a great pleasure to have you in Slovenia. We are proud and honored that Slovenian authorities have been entrusted with management and coordination of EUSAIR Facility Point for the Adriatic-Ionian macro-regional strategy. My colleagues have worked together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the European Commission to prepare this event. A big thank you goes to all of you who has really devoted, I know, for our side, I'm sure for the Commission, and especially Mrs. Irina, for this assignment. I believe we have proved that mobilizing partnerships at the European, national, regional, or local level pays off. Why? Because only together we are stronger and more successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We all have learned during the past period that the cohesion policy is implemented in a shared management. So it is my pleasure to invite also Mrs. Dana Spinant, the Director of DG Regio, responsible, listen very carefully, it's budget, communication, and general affairs. Dana, please.
Thank you very much, dear Andrea, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I'm very grateful to be allowed and invited to open this conference together with the Minister. I am delighted that the conference focuses on communication, and I am actually even thrilled that we have with us journalists, stakeholders, civil society, and hopefully also that most important person for all of us, which is the general public. It's because they will need to tell us some uncomfortable truth today from which we will learn. I guess this conference, by its sheer existence, answers the question whether communication should be a priority for macro-regional strategies. It definitely is. I even think that it should be one of the top priorities for macro-regional strategies. This is because, dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, we are losing the battle for the hearts and minds of the Europeans, as we just discussed before with the Minister. This is because many Europeans feel frustrated, even angered. Many have lost jobs because of the crisis. They fear losing their jobs because of globalization or losing their identity because of that. And they are disgruntled with the public institutions everywhere, and perhaps even more so with the EU, which is a bit further away from them and which is in itself for them a bit of globalization. So we are losing the battle for the hearts and minds of the European, but even trickier perhaps, we're also losing the way to their heart because we experience a tremendous revolution in communication. This is because of the rise of social media, which basically puts in the open sphere a huge volume of unchecked, unfiltered information which is not based on knowledge, which is not based on expertise, which is based on emotions. The more emotional, the blunter, the stronger the impact, and the more likes the information is going to have. And, sorry, friends from the old media whom I see in the room, the influence of the traditional media is declining. And so is, unfortunately, the quality and the reliability of the information that is in the public domain. In that picture, our nuanced, well-calibrated, full of details communications get lost. Our press releases have no chance to compete with that. So, what is more, the speed of the information and the volume make the whole cacophony extremely different to manage from our perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, we all in this room know that macro-regional strategies have a tremendous added value. For me, this statement is as clear and as rational as saying that Slovenians alone cannot keep the Adriatic Sea clean. It's obvious, but how many people are aware what these strategies bring, or even that they exist? The Eurobarometer surveys show that only between 7 and 14% of the Europeans have ever heard of any of the macro-regional strategies. Cohesion policy fares slightly better in the awareness of the Europeans, but not tremendously so. Around 35% of Europeans are aware of projects funded in the region under cohesion policy. Just 1/3 of the population. From those who know about it, 2/3 have a positive view. They think it does good things for the region. But the challenge is to get them to know about it. So what's the reason for this? Where does this communication deficit come from? Well, I would say that we don't communicate sufficiently and we don't communicate efficiently and effectively. We communicate about macro-regional strategies when there is an event, when there is a project opening, and then in the meantime we leave it, or we go for low-maintenance communication. We communicate about procedures, about processes, about governance, as we said last night during our very interesting game, but not about the results, not about the added value. We talk about procedures, we use calibrated, nuanced words, we give details, we talk about money, we talk about delegated acts, but we don't say what exactly that thing brought to the people in Slovenia, to the people in France, or to the people in the UK. And this is dangerous, because we live at a time where we can't take anything anymore for granted. It's no business as usual in the EU. One of the countries is negotiating separation from the EU. Populist parties are gaining ground everywhere. Public institutions are being challenged, and as I said at the beginning, clearly the European Commission is being challenged. I think that the Commission has got it. And if you look at the State of the Union speech of President Juncker of last week, there are some very powerful messages there to put the citizen at the center and basically to address the citizens' concerns, be they, or perceptions, be they based on reality or not. People in Central Europe are concerned about double food standards, right? Well, EU legislation exists in abundance to make sure that this doesn't happen, the double standard food doesn't exist in the EU, but it's a perception based on some documented facts, and the Commission will make it now a priority to address this concern and to address this perception, because this is something which the people care about. So we need to take a people-centered approach when we do policy. But it's not only that it's not business as usual in the EU, it's no business as usual for the EU budget. And there, with the departure of the UK, there will be a gap in that budget. And we need to see who will fill it in, to what extent, and what happens to cohesion policy. Will we lose out? Many people in our community fear that cohesion policy and macro-regional strategies, which are a part of it, which are under its umbrella, will lose money after 2020 because we will have a smaller budget. Will we? Well, I can't tell you. The Commission will make its proposals in May 2018, but I can tell you what will determine the choices that the Commission will make in May 2018, when it will put the proposals for the next multi-annual budget. What will determine this choice is the added value of the policies and the results that they bring. The Commission will defend a strong cohesion policy, provided we can show that that cohesion policy has added value and that what that money brings at the European level is more than what the money would have brought if it stayed at regional level or at national level. So this is a big challenge for us, decision makers and communicators, to show what the added value of our policy is, and not only until May, forever, because this is people money, and we are the policy which is the closest to the people. We do the schools and the roads and the bridges, and we create the jobs which people have in the research centers around their houses, and they just don't know it. So, the part of the Commission I work for, which is the Directorate General for Regional Affairs, took this challenge very seriously. We have adopted a communication strategy recently, and based on that, we are launching many new strands of communication activities, including a call for partnerships with the media. So we will provide grants to the media to report in an independent, objective, and quality way about what cohesion policy brings. I hope that macro-regional strategies will feature in the proposals from the media for which they seek financing, because it's a very valuable topic in which we wish to invest. But I'm going to tell you in detail about our communication plans, about what I think should be the principles for our communications on regional policy this afternoon. Now, at the end, I will turn to the communicators in this room, and I see a few. And I will tell them, forget about your old ways of working. That's what we are doing too at the Commission. And do forget about all the details and the technical beauties of the communications that you used to draft. I also now turn to the decision makers in this room, and I tell them, do prioritize communication. Because it's not packaging. It's not that we do our policies, we organize our events, we do our projects, and at the end, almost as an afterthought, we write a press release, we do a press conference, and that's it, we did communication. Communication is a continuum. You need to take care of it continuously, and you need to target your audiences with the messages that are going to resonate with them, and you need to target them with the tools that are going to reach to them. And now, I'm turning to the Slovenians in this room to tell you how delighted I am to be in the country which won the Eurobasket championship. I thought that this was going to resonate with this audience, and thank you to Matteo for the tip.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you for these enlightening words and getting us really to the subject. And I learned the other day, during the Bled Strategic Forum, there was a violinist performing the Mr. Pogačnik, how the genius actually work on a strategic management. And he explained that human resource is not a human resource issue, it's a human resonance. So, this brings us to our next panel, which is a step forward from the yesterday's discussion when we touched the media world today. An introduction to this panel, I would like to invite my colleague, Mr. Stojan Pelko, the former State Secretary of the Ministry of Culture in the Republic of Slovenia, and a communication advisor to the EU Special Representative in Kosovo, a lecturer at the Faculty of Arts in Ljubljana, but also the founder of the communication consultancy specifically manage in communication, and in this particular role we will see Stojan also in the afternoon. Stojan, the word is yours.
Good morning. My first proposal is that we add another hashtag to the list of your hashtags, and the hash would be a sea of troubles. Thank you very much for Andrea for inviting me. It gave me an opportunity to go through my old files, and I pick up 3, and I would like to present to you why. This is the table of content of my presentation. I will ask you how do you do. I will ask ourselves what do we do. I will try to ask a crucial question. Then ask to yes or no, yes, and then a little bit of audio-visual music, but just a little bit to see that without this we cannot survive. And at the end, I will ask ourselves what to do, a little bit in the tone of director. Going through my files, I found 3 roles that allow me to share this experience with you. Because basically, I really understand that I'm talking today to communicators, to professionals, and to the decision makers. So there was a time when we had the opportunity or the chance or the challenge to explain to Slovenia why it's good to join EU. And I was the creative director of the awareness campaign Slovenia at Home in Europe. Second, there were 3 years when, together with our former foreign minister, Mr. Žbogar, who was EU representative in Kosovo, I was his spokesperson. So I pretended we were speaking in the name of the EU there. But then, recently, I had the opportunity to work with the director of CERIC, which is Central European Research Infrastructure Consortium, where really it was maybe the closest to what you are looking for, where different voices have to come together. So my point is that in 3 different contexts, the 3 points of view were different. In the case of awareness campaign, it was really the state, mostly through government and government office information, that was speaking to its citizens. Not really to create awareness, because awareness was there. The referendum was 90%, so it was much more about spreading the information. So talking about the awareness campaign is, I would rather say, is to make us aware what is our task, and not to make aware citizens because the awareness was there. But it was a very specific situation. As I said, in Pristina, Mitrovica, Prizren, we were speaking through our projects. And I will mostly focus later on this, I was cutting things from the communication strategies that were presented to us through projects because there was an overload of everything. And a little example you will see later. But when I mentioned CERIC, I did it deliberately because it is really now, I think, the question whether 4 macro-regional strategies have something to say, not just to each other, but together in a certain common voice to their different target audiences. And I will mostly insist on the target audiences and the differentiation of voices, not on the unification of voices. But as soon as we move to this field, it's your field. And the 3 T's are here just to memorize the idea, because in fact it's absolutely nothing new. What we're talking about target audiences, we are talking about the tone that we are able to address them, and here, this is a specificity, I think, of this meeting, we are searching for a certain transversal impact. But you know that, and now the content doesn't change, it's only the title that changes. It's not anymore how do you do, it's what do we do. The target audiences we need to attract. The tone of communication is not something per se. We need to create it, and we create the tone of communication not just by throwing ideas, but by conceptualizing what do we have to say. And then, again, specificity of this meeting, if we want to spread what we created, we are searching for a certain transversal impact. And when Andrea has approached Matteo, my colleague, and me, early in, I would say, before summer, to ask one question. The question was, is there a certain possible horizontal linkage between something that is functioning very good on a vertical? So now, if we move this on the left side of the table, we are getting closer to something that I may call my advice. So in order to attract target audiences, you need to be interesting. That's, I mean, there is not even necessity to say anything about it. But my personal experience is that in order to create a proper tone of communication, you have to dare to reduce. To reduce logos, to reduce words, to reduce ideas, really to come to the bone or to the vertebra of what you say. My basic education is philosophy, so when I say ethics, I don't mean like this tabloidization of ethics in every profession, but I really mean doing good. So if you're talking about ethics in this profession, then you have to ask yourself some, not just transversal, but I would say fundamental questions. And here, because we live in the world, especially in the EU Commission, where so many acronyms are there, I suggest you one. I suggest you this acronym, IRE, which if you go to any online dictionary, first you will see it's very European because it's Old French and Middle English and Latin, which is good. But of course we know this was the goddess of anger. But if you go a little bit deeper into the dictionaries, it's not just anger, wrath, violence, and not just anger, wrath, rage, but there's also passion. And when you were referring to emotion, anger is very serious passion, and it's very productive passion if you know how to do with anger with certain ethical standards. So what I'm saying is that let's try sometimes to have this little question mark, is it what we are doing interesting, reduced enough, and ethical? And no wonder that many of us in our daily routine will ask this question with anger, because things that are getting on our table, things we are sometimes had to or approve or improve, are creating anger because we see, I would say, overwaste of words, or very often overwaste of money, but very, very often also a kind of humiliation of basic standards of communication, I'd say. And this is where ethics has to play its way. So now my sea of trouble gets a context, because recently a good friend of mine, a former director of Directorate for Culture and Democratic Governance at the Council of Europe, Mr. Robert Palmer, was in Ljubljana. He was presenting some specific topic on the Arts Council possible future in Slovenia. And he kind of pointed out that we are so often banalizing to be or not to be, but we never go a few lines further, saying and ask ourselves whether it's noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. So Mediterranean coast, sea, many troubles, but there is at least by trying to oppose them, there is a hope that we might end them. And I understood the whole, let's say, procedure of the last 6 months that I've been a little bit more closely watching, is that these few decision makers around European macro-regional strategies have not only jumped into the sea, but they are really now they want to oppose some of these troubles. And here the question is not anymore to be or not to be, it's really what to do or not to do. I have 3 suggestions, different, based on what we have been doing, and I will not be nostalgic, but I'll just say 2-3 words with each of these examples, just to understand where my lessons or lessons learned come from. First possible lesson is that, we could not underestimate the power of the visual. And I'll give you an example. At that time, when we were doing the awareness campaign, we were not aware yet that love is in the name of our country. There was not, like now, wherever you will see Slovenia, you will feel love because it's there. So this verbal part of our message was not present as it is now. That it is now Slovenia perceived differently is the power of words and recognizing a few letters in one word. But at that time, that's why I'm saying it's not nostalgic, we were a little bit naive and I would say too optimistic. We thought that we are an ideal match for European Europe because, if you put their blue and yellow together, it's green. Why? Who else can claim this, green country and at the same time entering into something new? Why I'm saying this was done by my colleague, friend, art director Boris Balant, and this star really helped us because it was saying farewell to one star, saying hello to other star, but there was a visual sign of something that could be claimed only as, I would say, reduced to the bone. Now you will see again blue and yellow, but in completely different context. In Kosovo, we were going all around and opening projects, the visibility manuals, And when I came, I really make anger my colleagues from cooperation, operation, because when they put this on the field, it was one of my first field trips. I did this slide saying, do we really need to say 3 times the same? Because in Slovenia, I say, you say in mill, you say 3 times. I said in mill, you say in mill, right, where you do flour. You need to say 2 times because it's a little bit more loud. But apparently in EU, you have to say 3 times everything because unless... Why there are 2 flags? Why there is an acronym and the explanation of the acronym? Why is it saying that unique is just a play of words and the toponym unique? Why flag is there twice and once is stable and once is... So, I mean, you say it would be stupid to ask this question, but in fact, why would not we just say that this was brought to you to the European Union, or even more banal, that this was built for you by the European Union? And it's not even a joke, it's a tragic joke, but during the way of Bosnia, somebody has written on a building, this is Serbia, and the guy comes and says, no, this is post office. And that's what we are talking here, whether you are claiming something ideological very high, or we are claiming what is what. And this kind of, I mean, now it's easy to go again, but from here to here, nothing was lost, basically. Nothing was lost, because, as I said, we know we were in unique, we know what is there built, so it's really just this cherry on a pie. But this is, when I talk about reduction, and even some anger with it, I think this is what I'm saying. And the third example, and that was meant really to introduce my other colleague with whom I would have to share the table this afternoon, but he unfortunately will not be here, Matteo. When we were working together for CERIC, my task was communication guidelines, and his was then processing whole visual identity. But we discovered that we cannot do it first me and then him, but that we have to do it together from the moment one, because somebody who is involved in the process design can help you very much doing the things that I'm telling you now, reducing, going to the bone of something. And for example, my thinking was, all kinds of... The problem is that when we who are good in words talk about visuals, and then we think, what could CERIC be? Should it relate to cherries because people will remember? Should it be open door to science? Should it be, something to do with the chemical science? And on and on and on. And Matteo came and said, but look, the letters tells everything. And what stays at the end was this. There was no visual needed. And to me, this is an ethical decision. It's not visual decision, it's not verbal decision, but why would we always like to please the view if there is something more important to say? So in a way, reducing or even deciding between verbal and visual sometimes is almost an ethical decision, because here it would be very easy to say, oh, the client likes a little bit of, colors, let's put some cherries. No, it would be underestimating our importance, because this will stay now. So, to do or not to do? If you reduce all the way, to asceticism, then nothing happens. No. How could we be interesting, reducing, and ethical? I think here, Dana, is my second point that refers to what you said. Reducing, we could also interpret, this R, we could interpret as results-driven. And in my mind of social sciences, results is not always just tangible walls. Result is action, very, very often. But the result sometimes is just the awareness. And I understand that the awareness of macro-regional strategies are not at the level that you want. But very often, with the amount of the information we are sharing, we are creating a certain knowledge. And for me, it would be really important to understand the difference between the awareness and the knowledge. The knowledge is there when there is also this ethical stance that, what we are preaching to each other has to have some, not just impact, but has to have some solidity in time. So this IRA, when you are a little bit angry, when you are interested enough that people will listen to you, and when there are results behind, this is something that I want to show you with, and now I will ask my colleague to move to this. It's a little bit strange example, and you might laugh, you might think it's naive, but from all the things that I brought from Kosovo from 3 years' time, this is one of the things that I like most. And it's a pure coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences, but this Tuesday on the plane from Pristina, I met this lady with injured legs, so Olympic and world champion with injured legs because she had some surgery and now she's going to treatment to Ljubljana, but she said she will be okay. This was shot in 2014, and Why? Because we reduced the usual celebrities, like pop stars and politicians, to somebody who speaks in her own name. This was one thing. I think what she says is seriously ethical, but then I will explain why this example. So it's 2 minutes.
My name is Majdin Kelmendi. I'm from Kosovo. I do judo. I'm a world champion in 52 kilos. When I was 8 years old, my sister and my friends started to do judo. My sister was telling me all the time, come on, try it. It's really fun, it's really good. Then after 2 weeks, we went in competition in Sarajevo. This was the moment when I really loved judo because I saw that a lot of girls do this sport and it was really nice. Growing up through judo, you learn a lot of things. It's a kind of sport which learns you to have respect for everything. Now judo is the most successful sport in Kosovo. A lot of judokas wanted to come in Kosovo. When they came, they saw that it's really not how people think that Kosovo is.
The last minute she speaks about the hopes of young people in Kosovo joining European Union. So I wanted to give back to the moment when Slovenia had this similar hopes and how at this certain moment a certain naivety is still part of the game, but the emotions are also there. But there is also a lot of anger right now there because they cannot travel to Europe, as you know. But my point is following one. If Ira, and remember this word, as I said, antique goddess of anger, stands for interesting, results-driven and ethical, what can in fact we do in our roles of communicators to please this goddess of passion? And this is where I wanted to use this example a little bit to develop further that our contents always need to have a human face. It's simply not enough to put plaque on an opened factory or even a judo club. It's different when the champion tells you why this judo club was supported by funds. I cannot underestimate the importance of the professionalism of the execution. So many good messages are killed by, sorry to say, but semi-professional people that are just around. And coming from this field also, from the professional advertising, I would say, this is something that even with a lot of funds is underestimated. And then this is also, we haven't paid for the distribution of this movie because the attractivity of it and using all kinds of social media had great impact. And I agree with Andrea that it's great to put communication and budget together, especially in the decision-making process, because also this is something very often underestimated, because we think that we have a lot of channels and a lot of people, so we will do it. No. I think what we have to do is just rearrange this and never forget what is the key. The key is the audiences. And by this, although it's banal, this alphabet, but I think we are getting close to an alphabet of the communication. You always start with the audience. And in the afternoon, I will compare in a kind of strategic table which of communication part of macro-regional strategies did with the audiences. You will see that, in fact, they are on the right track. Because this is how they start their communication strategy, not but by mission and vision, but whom we are talking to. Budget is essential. And again, I mean, it could be zero, and I will explain later. It could be zero, but we should know where the relation between what you have and what you want are there. Content, distribution, and execution. This is for me A, B, C, D, and E. But if we want this alphabet to be understood, then don't get it just with words. Get into a little more details. It's crucially different when we are talking about decision makers, partners, and citizens. And again, in the afternoon, when we will compare, you will see there are the differences between strategies. Some people put just a few concepts. Some started to think immediately with this. With budget, everybody knows this distinction between paid, owned, shared, and earned. I don't want, by any chance, to leave the misunderstanding that when we are talking media, there is something to be paid. I want you to know that for our communication, we have a lot of owned channels, but where the real fight is, the Danas fight is for shared and earned. it's not normal, it's not obvious that everything that we create will be shared. There should be interest reduction and ethical dimension. But the most important, I think, is what is earned, and this cannot be paid. Distinction of content between informative, promotional, and critical, we will discuss much, I hope, further into the panel, and that's where I'm closing my opening few slides. It's with the execution. I'm glad that Matteo is not with us, because the first thing he would change would be the opening slide of the conference. There's too much thing, but I'm sure now if I ask you what you remembered, you would say, know your neighbor. You would say, know your neighbor, and you might point out to your logo there, and then a few hashtags because you may be using them already. And this is something that that we are learning in a few seconds. So among all words, there are just a few that resonates in our head. If we have something to do with them, like with hashtagging tweets, there is immediately more memorability. But then, visually, if there would be one thing that for all of you would stay in your head, it was in Portorož, it was in this hotel, it was confronting the sea. I dare to say now that maybe of all of the images, the minister's image that you are standing at the point where 3 countries can be seen is the most memorable, because it's not obvious. It's not always like this. So here I give the floor to the one that will give the floor to us, and thank you for your interest.
Thank you, Stojan, for this. I think you gave us quite a lot of tools for thought. I hope we will keep remembering this in our daily work, because this is really the way how we should reflect and reduce our efforts to really target them to what is an impact. But this brings us now to the next roundtable. And I'm delighted to invite Mrs. Barbara Zrimšek, head of a program of education of the radio and TV of Slovenia. If you would remember from yesterday, what we heard is that the role of media and the real journalists, the true journalists, their mission is also the education. And with the education, we start with the knowledge creation and bringing the element of education in what we are really doing. And we were discussing yesterday, with all the changes in the world, the education is very traditional profession, not really always changing to what we need. So that's extremely important also when we discuss the communication, our efforts in all this passion-making business of ours. So Barbara, and please invite the members of the panel. Thank you.
Hello to everybody. I'm very honored that I'm here. I think that, so please, I'm honored to invite the guest of the panel, Professor Thomas Bauer from Vienna University. Please sit whenever you want. My colleague Rok from Primorske novice. I was also communicating with Matteo. Hello, please. Mirella, my colleague, freelancer. And also my colleague, Dainius. It's okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Please. And Stojan, please, of course. Probably? Yeah, okay. So, hello again to everybody and to my guests. In the communication before the conference, I think that agree in our mails that we will be very practical, that we don't have presentation, but we will present ourselves, our practices, our good practices, and at the end maybe we will come to some very practical decision how to do when we will exchange our experiences. So I think that it's the best way to know each other a little bit more, that you present yourself and how are you linked with this communication with European affairs. This is the base, I think. I have been journalist in news program for many years, and I always remember that we were talking with colleagues that we are the translator of European affairs to the citizens and to our audience. Professor Bauer, please present yourself.
Thank you very much for being invited to this Congress. I'm very happy and very glad to be here and maybe to be able to contribute some ideas. I would like to start, even if we said we would like to be very practical, let me say a theoretical word first, just to open my heart for that. When we talk about the media, I think we are already so far, at least in communication science, not to talk about the structures. Let's talk about the use of media as the media. The use of media makes what media is. Because if we talk about media and we think of newspaper or radio or television or internet, we are talking always about somehow instruments and thinking the instruments should do what, or we do with the instruments what we want them to do. It's us who is doing the society, it's us who is doing the society, as you say. And a radio is a radio if we listen to it, and a newspaper is a newspaper as and why we listen to it, or we think anybody can listen to it. So the media are not some factors in between of our communication. The mediality is the character of our communication. And as the society is what its communication is like, so the society as well has a mediality side. The society, as we think about is nothing, it's only in our head, so it's a communicative construct and not something, an object we should act in front of. So when we talk about media, communication and society, we talk about how we think about it. And communication science cannot say better than anyone else, as we already do, what communication is. Communication is as we think about it and as we exchange what we think about it. So that's why we should not think we could make communication perfect, but we could make us ourselves more competent in communication, knowing that communication is the matter of the society as well as my own life. I think this is very important as an idea, not to talk about the structures. Let's talk about the meaning, as you say, the role, the meaning of the media doing the society. Talking about the practice, what I'm doing, I could tell you about some different ones. The one is a community media in Vienna, a community TV station in Vienna. I found it 10 years ago. It's called Octo, this one. Another one is a media literacy project by which I learned a lot from, and I think I could share a lot of ideas also to this forum and audience. It's called Medlit, a media literacy project with Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. And it's interesting because it's interesting to get to know what other cultures, how other cultures are reacting to the globalization of the media, and what they are doing in order to do their society, and because they are neighbors somehow to each other. They could not be more different than they are in religion, in society, in political understanding, and everyday culture, and that's why. There we could find how others react to the globalization, what makes this to their culture, so we could think what from outside what does the globalization with our cultures in Europe. Talking about cultures, I think we should also know that culture is not a territory. It's not surrounded by border or done by language or by religion or by history. Culture is the way as we do it, and it's one of the versions to do our lives and to do the society and to understand the meaning of our lives. And that's why we need to each other, because it always changes. As change, social change, cultural change, media change is the structure of what we are talking about. I'm ready with the theory. Let me tell about Octo. Telling a story.
Maybe we can present also other
I'm
guests, and then
yeah.
we come to this
Okay,
concrete.
much,
yeah. Matteo, your life is linked with communication, with regional policy, cohesion policy, and also macro regions every day, probably.
Not every day, but quite often. Yeah, now I work at DG Regio, communication unit, so at the Commission. And before, I used to work for quite some years in a regional newspaper, and then I, let's say, jump on the other side of the river. I was press officer for a regional authority, so I saw a little bit of the things. But I want to really start with the very practical things, suggesting what you said, and also to share with you a story which I will be short, but it's quite interesting about when I was following the media program of one of our macro-regional strategy last year in Stockholm. I don't know if you remember, but in 1994 there was this ship that was called Estonia. It was en route from Tallinn to Stockholm that sank. And this ship, there was over 800 people that died. No? And this has been the deadliest, shipwreck in peacetime in European waters. And these stories came to my mind when I was in Stockholm with the journalists following the media program, because they were invited by the Commission to follow the macro-regional strategy. They would stay, a couple of representatives of all the journalists around the Baltic Sea region. On the first day they came to the conference, and they were briefed by our colleague about the macro-regional strategy. Then they met some prime minister, they met high-level speaker, commissioner, and so they had an overview. Then I was talking with them, and they say, yeah, this is interesting for us, but still we don't know under which angle we can tackle this story, because we need something that can be in for the people, not something for our reader, for our listener, for our viewer. On the second day, we went to a project visit that was run by this Swedish coastal guard, together with the Swedish army, and they decide to put the force together, first in Sweden, then with all the other countries around the macro-regional strategy, to be prepared in case there could be an accident in the sea. And this really was a story, was a person that was telling this story, was a real beneficiary, how we call it in Europe. So it's like one person that was the project promoter that told this story to the journalist. And for them, this was really the hint, was the hook to then expand and also talk about the strategy. They really need some human touch. They read some story to be able to then develop and talk about the strategy. And when I came back to Brussels, of course, after some days, I received this press clipping, and of course, all the journalists have covered the story, and this was the incipit of the story. Maybe they didn't cover the Prime Minister, they didn't cover our Commissioner, but the story was there. This is to say that I know you journalists, you are a very practical person. You need something, you need a story to start off, and then you can expand on to the rest.
And not just we,
Yeah,
also the
people.
citizens. yeah, I think this is essential. Mirella, I think that you can take this micro. It's more practical.
Thank you.
Please, you are freelancer in this Danube region.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about you.
Yes, of course. I'm a freelance journalist in Germany, and when I was beginning with the studying for journalism, it was the time when I was asking myself why I cannot read anything about positive things from the Balkan region, because my parents are from former Yugoslavia, and I was very surprised. You only was able to read only the bad things, what happened, about the war, about the hate. And then when I was finishing my studying, I tried to publish some features about positive things in the media. It was not possible. It always was like, we are not interested, it's not so interesting region for us, it's so far away. And said, no, it's not so far away. You fly only 1 hour to be there. And it's the heart from the Europe. And because of the anger, I begin to write my own blogger because of the anger. I didn't expect that someone will read it. It was for me. And now I had many readers. One of them was the colleague of mine from Danube Connect, is the magazine, where we make features and articles about all the countries where the Danube is crossing. And we are working with young journalists that are very curious, they're very creative. And now we are trying to bring all the best stories from all the countries where, I'm so sorry for saying this, where the European Union sometimes, they treat them like a stepmother.
I'm sure that people, they want to hear good stories.
Yes, they
but
will.
But media, they don't bring them.
Yes,
so, yeah.
Absolutely. They're very surprised because, of course, of the norm of all the media houses that we need, all the big houses, that they are doing the features about that. So now you have great bloggers all around the European Union, especially from all this country, even in Hungary. There are very great young journalists. They blogs, very active in social media, where you can hear how they are fighting for the rights. Unfortunately, all the media houses, the big media houses in the European Union, they are not focused on that. You know, they of course they have their old conservative strategies for working. The journalists, I'm very sorry for them. They even don't have time to make some researches because at the end, the financial one. It has to be there, what they want, of the media houses, because the media houses now, they're not ruled by journalists, now they're ruled, unfortunately, by businessmen, and I think this is the big problem.
Dainius, you are also coming from big public house, in a way.
Yeah, actually, now I'm working for Journalists Union and also at European Humanities University. I'm teaching practical radio journalism. And I remember when I was a journalist on radio and television, we started discussions about European Union and Lithuanian experience like more than 12 years ago. And my first experience was very interesting. We started a program which was called We European in 2005, just after 1 year when we was new member of European Union. And most strange thing was for me during more than 50 programs, we had different topics to discuss with people, how we are feeling in European Union, what we think about reforms, about changes, about everything. Most of people was very skeptical. In the very beginning, the first program was, are we really European? Most of people was voting no. For me, it was not just surprising, I was shocked. We just joined the European Union, you know, most of politicians were so happy about membership in European Union, promises about money, everything, but people were saying very simple things, you know. The first argument was, our incomes are not so big, we are not really European. And that's mean, blah, 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 and this is bullshit, European Union is not so good, and so on, so on, so on. For me, it was very strange, but now I know very well that most of people who are watching television, especially programs, talk show programs and journalist programs, they are unhappy. Scientists said most of people who are sitting at home, who has no money for restaurants and so on, they are just watching television. My program was live program on Friday evening. I was asking me, who are sitting on Friday evening watching television debates about European Union? Unhappy people. That's why when I heard in the very beginning about role of media to educate people in some way, I would say also we need some education also for journalists, for media people, for officials, for most of us, because we need to speak about feelings of people also. I was more than 9 years in Ministry of Justice as a spokesperson, and we was discussing with lawyers, if we have cases in courts, why people are so unhappy, even if we have like good results in a very formal way. Some of colleagues were saying very simple. It's not about law system. It's not about regulation. It's not about penalties. It's just about feelings of people, especially feelings of people who supports victims. But most of media people speaks about banditos, crime people, not about victims. The same with European Union. I was watching your presentation. It was very good because we discussed for many years do we need more attractive things or very simple communication. Now we understand we need very simple answers if we have very difficult questions. That's why as a journalist and in some way as consultant for communication, I was whole time discussing with people, what is your idea about communication? What is your personal, needs of communication? Do you need some support for people? Do you need some understanding? Because if people understand all the problems which we discuss as a journalist, okay, they know everything about the problems, but it doesn't mean they support us. It doesn't mean they are happy about it. That's why we have very different positions sometimes as a journalist especially. And when we discuss about the role of media also, sometimes it's like the same for some officials, some politicians, media, journalists, and some blah, blah, blah. But it's very different, And for media, we need really different products at the moment. And for example, my experience shows we have very few good projects which are related to our region. Because when we speak about Baltic region, we have not only countries, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, we have more. But for regular people, Baltics means Lithuanian, Latvian. Estonia, it's Ungar-Finnish. It's not Baltics. For some people in my small town. That's why the macro and micro issues is quite different. Thank you.
You also opened the question, who is still watching TV, who is still reading newspapers, Rok, new approaches. We must also find how and where to communicate, because this old media, they are in the crisis at the moment, I think. If I see our TV, also newspapers, we need web, we need social media to attract people back, and maybe something else, I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably a question for like $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rok, CEO of Primorske novice. Mirella would call us the businessman running the media. So this is who we are. This is how we look. I don't think we're so bad, right?
Okay.
But yeah, what I do, my daily battles are trying to explain to my journalists, to everybody working in this area, that media and consumption of media is changing, and it's changing every day. It's not like it changed and it's staying like this for 20 years now. No, it's going to change forever. It's never going to stop. So the questions that we are tracking and attacking and trying to get an answer to is, like you said, the newspaper needs to change, the TV needs to change. Well, the main realization needs to be that you're not selling newspapers. You're selling information. You're selling stories. And the traditional media have like a brand. And if you watch the old school movies, like everybody says, oh, if it's true, it's going to be written in the newspapers. And that thing is still live like right now. So despite all the financial situations and the crisis and whatnot, the custom costs, we're actually looking to attract like writers that have stories that inspire other people. So what Mirella said, like we're actually looking for those type of writers, but at the same time, it's really hard to find them. So like I said, the biggest challenge that we have is like firstly come to the realization that what we do is we produce news, we produce information. The information needs to be attractive and needs to be good, it needs to be well presented and whatnot in the way that the readers of the 21st century are gonna like consume it. Another question and the biggest realization is that when I started work at Primorske novice 4 years ago, and we are a regional newspaper, everybody thought that our competition was like the other newspapers in Slovenia. But in fact, our real competition is like Google, Facebook, and so on. And the only way to compete with these big IT tech firms is like to have better content, to have content that attracts more readers. And obviously, since I'm an economist, that content that readers will pay to read. So, yeah.
And also some professional approach. Nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. Like I mean, the biggest plus that traditional media have is like that a lot of people feel their brand has tradition. They they feel it's good. So they kind of have that feeling that, oh, the authors that work at that media, they're professionals. And a lot of people, though, at the same time read, nothing bad about bloggers, but there are some bloggers who are like not journalists. And they read a little part of like news or something they take for granted, when in fact it's not. So yeah, definitely it has to be quality.
Okay, if I can share a little bit my experience with you. I have been working in news program for many years, and it was the problem because I could not sell through the news information the European issues. Also my friends, they were asking me when we were gathering, why are you reporting about such a boring thing like European policy? And then I decided, and I started to write the project about very simple things, about storytelling, and we sent them to Brussels, and I think I was more successful than in news program. Is storytelling a kind of recipe, Stojan? Could you help me to develop this from this point?
It's a buzzword, and it's always with buzzwords that became dangerous, but sometimes it's difficult for a press release to have a story, I'm sure. It's really linked between the content and the channels. I think there are some channels that simply do not allow us to go just with facts, but we need a fil rouge to combine them. And in this sense, then I guess storytelling helps us because it links with the, let's say, citizens' interest that you were mentioning. I don't even think about journalists so much, but I think about movies. And of course, I think there is a certain general culture that help us refer to this and then to communicate around it. But I can talk about maybe Slovene experience of when some of the topics that could be more difficult to perceive, the moment when a professional journalist with a name touch it becomes story. I always refer to Rok Hladnik from Neonik. It's a competition to some of you, but he's a living proof how a very difficult question can become a story, and I think it is directly linked with his experience as a war journalist. So it's in a way once you go through difficult times and you are able to reduce to the core your story, then you become a storyteller. But it's very banal what I'm saying. It's not something that would be directly useful for, I would say, macro-regional communication strategies. But when we were doing with Matteo's kind of desktop analysis, it was really clear that when the projects of certain strategy was and the results of these projects were linked with the concrete benefit for somebody, then it became a story, as I said, with a human face. And in this sense, I think it's very telling.
Thomas, is Octo TV selling stories, telling stories, selling stories?
Yeah, thank you very much. When we talk about that journalism is declining, then maybe the storytelling as well is declining. If storytelling always means to reduce the complexity. Maybe Europe is not interesting because and you say it's boring, because there's no complexity. But complexity does not mean Europe is complex. Complexity is always as we think things are. It's not an attitude of the thing itself. It's as we think the things. So then, complexity always means there's a reference to my life and to the options of my life and how I should do my life. So, if you think journalism always should reduce the complexity, I would say no. Focus on complexity. It does not mean make it more complex, but focus on complexity in order to give the people a reference to the meaning of Europe and to the meaning of their own life. And this is not only done by storytelling. That's why the social media, they don't tell stories. They communicate each other. They have dialectic communication. They have dialogue, because we have enough of discourse in the sense of just spreading information. That's it, what we should change as well, and this is the media change we should go with. It's a social change, and it's really a radical change in the ontology of the communication. Communication is changing as the society is changing, and we get a new understanding of society in a horizontal way. In a less hierarchical way, in a less institutional way, in a more spontaneous way, and in a way which has more to do with my own view of my life, my own meaning of my life. Octo, for example, is coming to the point. Octo is a community TV station which was founded 10 years ago in Vienna. Saying that these people, already at that time, about 30% of the people has not been Viennese people. They have been migrants, minorities, special communities. And the idea was to give them the feeling to be a part of the society when they become a partner of the society with more participation, giving them a participation. That means they should have an opportunity to get to be presented in the society and to react to others in order to build with the resonance body of a society. So we developed a structure of doing the media not as a journalist, but as one who is a partner in the society, being educated a little bit, understanding what you should do with the instruments, with the infrastructure, but learn to become a partner of the society in the way as you are able to communicate. Don't forget your culture of communication. So we built small communities, and now we have around 125 communities doing this program 7 days, 24 hours. We do not cover any event. The event is always done by the community or by the communities itself. And we found out that they get so much interest to each other because they are somehow in a competition who is present in the society in which way. And so they learn from each other. And of course, that was the way how the program also developed and became now somehow a cult program, at least in Vienna, but we are also cooperating with community media in Amsterdam, in Berlin, and now, for example, in Vietnam. And China, the CCTV is very much interested in this model of doing public communication in order to give a region the feeling it's worth to live here with the opportunities as well as the problems of a region in order to be able to and to learn to take care of what's happening here. So it's my region and not the one who is just somehow around me. So I am the region. This is what is really the message of Octo.
Dainius, please.
Also to add some points from our experience, actually, when we speak about media, also for many years it was treated like whole media business and media model, but it's not so, you know. And in our case, we had for many years small region, Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia during Soviet times. And now we have real changes in some way, you know, because if we have readers or people who are watching television who are 50 years and older, most of them, they was for many years forgotten by politicians and also by media in some way, and not from Russia, because most of these people, you know, they can speak Lithuanian, Latvian or Estonian, which are different languages actually. They don't communicate together, you know, somehow. They don't have media which are dealing with three languages, and most of them was using Russian-speaking media coming from Russia, and they had all understanding about European Union issues also, covering by Russian federal channels which are owned by Russian government, you know, and they was very skeptical about most of European Union issues, you know, and they don't speak English, don't speak German, they cannot communicate in foreign languages. And for this part of society, which are a very big one, most of them are, like, during elections, very important part, especially pensioners. And we was just watching television, Russian-speaking television, no Russian-speaking media in our countries, like in good quality, I mean. And now we have like some alternative, like Gazeta Baltia, news portals, and something like that. But for many years, process of communication was very strange. We was living in real bubbles, but like in small ghettos, And we forgot some audiences, even media, mainstream media actually. And now public broadcaster, for example, they try to do something more, in this field. But we spent like more than 20 years not actually communicating with people. We was communicating with audience in some way, not with people. And we don't have platforms and products, different languages, for example. And for Lithuania and Latvia, languages are similar actually, but Estonia is totally different. And most of people, they cannot discuss about macro projects in our regions, security issues, energy, because in my towns, for example, nobody knows everything, or at least something about position of people in Latvia or Estonia. They know something from politician side, because some meetings are like somehow, covered, but not like real position of regular people. And that's why now our news portals and some of modern media, also televisions, make some projects. Coming young journalists to Latvia, to Estonia, speaking with regular people about big projects of European Union, big projects of Baltic countries, and they give some reflection from people like you, from countries like Latvia and Estonia, never before. But all these projects, they started just after 2014, maybe 15, after war in Ukraine, about many discussions of crisis in European Union, refugees, and so on, so on. It means just after some problems and troubles for politicians, media also decided we have some problems also with our audience. And it's quite interesting, because if we have problems, we are doing something more, not like before. That's why my answer and proposal is all the time, let's speak about problems, when we will do something, good things,
If we are talking about communicating macro regions, with very practical issues, employment, sustainable development, and so on. And we were also talking about social media, where the young generation is present, more present. Should we focus to young generation according these issues and communicating these issues? Please, just, Rok.
I think I'm the youngest here, so. Firstly, just a short reply. I think that explaining complex issues regarding European Union in a complex way is going to make everything even more complex, and nobody's going to listen or read about it. Stojan made a good presentation. I think it was a billboard, very complex with a lot of information that then, like after transformation, had just one flag and one thing. I think that's the whole issue about communicating about European Union problems. And if you walk, I'm going to give an example. If you walk down the street and ask, like, whoever you want to ask, hey, Slovenia is now in European Union for 13 years, I believe. What changed your life? And they're going to say, open borders and euro. This is it. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more going on, right? In Hungary, for example.
What about highways and so on?
No, highways, nobody paid for it. I mean, there's a huge gap between what the government wants to send the message and how the audience or the people receive the message. And the biggest the gap this is, the less absorbable the information is going to be. And in Slovenia, we have the same situation. We have the ministry here, so she's going to be mad at me. But I think our government is really bad at communicating what they want to do. And then the people, the voters, the citizens, don't understand it, and they don't see the result of it. While if you turn this around and you show them the result, okay, so with this policy, we made a new street, or we brought you a new house, or whatever, something like that, they're going to exactly understand, oh, okay, so this is it. They're going to connect the dots together. Going back to your question, I think social media and internet and everything that's possible and still yet to be invented are just different platforms to access different audiences. So firstly, you need to understand what message you want to send and to who you're sending it to. Like newspapers has its pluses and minuses, and you need to understand for what the newspaper platform is good for. Same applies to to radio, to television, and so on. And it's exactly the same for the internet and like all the social media. So how I feel as probably one of the younger generation in here, it's that everything that's like being accepted on an European Union level, we don't feel it because like there's nobody speaking our voice out, right? There's nobody communicating with us. And at the same time, I'm just going to finish with this.
I think that here it's also the politicians are guilty about that.
Of course. But I mean, every time we blame the politicians, so let's blame them.
Yeah, because
well.
You know, they blame European Union when something is not good, and something is good. We are the national level, so I think it's quite present.
I agree, but I mean, you like whatever is going to be accepted on like European Union base, it's going to affect the youngest the most because they have the most of the time to live, right? And I mean, communicating to the younger generation what we want to do with the European Union, I think it's very important. But firstly, you need to answer that question yourself. What do we want to do? And when you have the answer, you start communicating. Because if you don't have a clear vision or a clear answer to that question, the message you're going to send, it's going to be very foggy and faded.
A little bit about social networks, you know, and the role of social networks with young generation. It's also related to system of education, very close, you know. And now we have a lot of discussions about reform of system of education in our country and how we can compare, you know, books, social networks, internet portals, and a program of school, because it's like mixed reality, you know, nowadays. And for example, I have 4 kids, and one of them is 12 years old boy. He likes internet very much, and in some way television, not so much, you know. And he likes to read articles in magazine. If he has magazine, he can read articles about China, trade, you know, everything, asking me. But if I give some similar small article in newspapers, that now it's not interesting. I was asking why. It's, you know, it's very short story. It's not interesting for me. I said, but it's okay, because, you know, you communicate on social networks even like for 10 or 15 pieces of, you know, of something. That, look, it's different case. If I like to read some story, it need to be like long read or something like that, 12 years old. It means usually we split society. Young generation, social networks, media, like new media and something like that, and newspapers or magazines related to older generation is not so in some way. And we need to think about whole of these platforms. We cannot find one platform for one audience. And they also are people. They are not new generation. They are people. And they read books, they go to school, they communicate with people, they are traveling, they go, for example, for holiday somewhere, to Crete or somewhere. They are asking all the peoples, they see somehow also politicians. They communicate on social networks with politicians sometimes. And the communication is very active and interactive in some way. But when we speak of messages, the biggest problem, I guess, is message, especially from politicians' side. Why? Because I have a good example with Baltic region and energy. It was discussing for many years independency from Russia and so on, so on, so on. And after, people saying, look, we have pipelines, Germany and Russia. What does it mean? It means like it's just business. But we have big strategy. And people want out, what does it mean? Small, big business? Big business, yeah? And strategy. How they compare. And politicians are speaking like, look, it's like welcome to reality. Or something like that. It's very problematic issues, especially strategic issues, because it's also not just results, also process, long process of many things. And people need in some periods like, okay, small results with very clear answers. Social networks is very good for that, for small, very short answers. But if we need some discussions, if we need some education, let's say in some way, we cannot like reach people with 15 characters. It's impossible, my personal opinion.
Mirella, you want to add something? Yeah.
I would like to say something about the bloggers again. Yes, you are right, not everybody is a journalist, but it also hasn't to be, because, you know, the new generation, because it said they are not interested in highways, I can tell you why. Our generation, before we went to be 18, we were saving money for having our car. The new generation, they are not interested in it. They want to save their money for traveling. They want to meet another one cultures, tradition, and so on, you know. And I think this is also one point the media has to be to take the feelings of this young generation. You're right, the old one, they will forget. But now we are on the way to forget even the new one generation. And now we have to be thankful that they're so interested, so curious, you know. And I know many bloggers, you're right, they don't write like a journalist has to do. But he just keep the feeling of the young generation they want. And for example, me, I follow many bloggers. I like the traveling. And what's very nice, he has so many followers. But if I'm interested, I just send him one question, he will answer me. If I send to a media house, I have to wait a very long time, or I will get one answer. We will in some weeks you will get the answer. You know what I mean?
About European Commission, if you send the question.
And it depends on. Of course, I try to talk to some in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I never get an answer. So of course, I just can talk about what the other one tell me. But of course, I would also like to have the answer, if it's right, of this one, of the responsible one, you know, like the high representative of Bosnia-Herzegovina. I never get an answer, you know. And I think this is really beautiful that even in all the countries of the Danube, you know, why we say Danube connects, the young people, they don't have the borders in the brain, you know. Like the elder one. And for example, I just can talk very much about Bosnia-Herzegovina, where the parents try, and especially the politicians try to make the borders between the ethnical groups, you know. But the young people, they don't want. Thankful to the bloggers, to social media, they see what is happening outside. That is all. It's not everything right. What is written, you know, in Republika Srpska, in Federation, in Banja Luka, in Mostar, you know. And I think we have to be thankful for that, and we have to support them, especially the big media houses.
Rok, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, I completely agree with this. Maybe I was misunderstood before, but the point I was trying to make is that the information you can find on the internet is not always right. And people tend to believe really fast something they feel it's right, and they read it somewhere and they think, oh, this is it, right? So that was regarding the blogger thing. But one thing that came exactly from my experience about the forgotten generations is like, when I came to a newspaper, I was a journalist before as a student, a sport journalist, and I came to the newspaper and everybody was telling me, so the population is getting older, there's more older people and so on, so why does the readership or the subscription doesn't go up? And everybody was quiet. Like, what's the answer to this question? We have more old people, more old generation. Why are there no people buying newspapers? Because they're not used to. Because nobody approached them where they were like 30, 40, 50 to give them the newspaper as a platform to read. So that's where I started to think, all right, so I guess this is going to be a problem with, like, no offense, older journalists are going to write content for like younger generation. And that was exactly the case. Like, they couldn't write in a way that would be attractive for the younger generation. So what we do, or what we did, and we're still trying to do it because we're just, we're not a big media house, we're a smaller media house. We have different generations of journalists writing for different generations of audiences, and it works perfectly. To write articles for like younger people, it's going to be really hard. If I give a younger generation journalist to write for younger population, they're all going to love it and read it because they speak from inside. And they tell the stories in a way that everybody's going to understand. And I think that needs to be done from the European Commission as well, the European Union. You just cannot run your communication from like one platform or like from one user, one journalist or whatever, one PR guy. It has to be more of them. And they need to understand all the audience.
Yes.
Yes, you're right. But I think the media house now, it should be in the position to tell the public which is the good story and which is the bad story. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
And I think the media houses have to...
I agree completely. Like, a lot of traditional media houses saw the internet as, oh my God, like this is bad. There's huge competition, right? The European Union has a huge plus compared to the USA, because in USA everybody speaks English. So a newspaper in New York, a newspaper in Los Angeles, everybody can read it. Despite in European Union, from Germany, and reading a newspaper from I don't know, a city, and you're from Slovenia or from Koper or Portorož, you cannot read the same newspaper or the same internet page. And this is a huge plus for us, and we need to use it.
Matteo, what kind of information DG Regio is supporting?
No, I will reply to your question.
Okay.
But I just want to say that I think European Union has a lot to sell, very locally, with a lot of concrete results. But the duty to communicate about the European Union is not only Brussels, because we are far away and we have not the means to communicate in all the 28 member states, but of course it's a joint effort with the communicators at the regional level, at the national level. This is added value, for instance, of cohesion policy, macro-regional strategy, where are several actors that can communicate about the concrete result on this. Our duty as a public communicator is like to gain your trust, that we really find good things to sell you, and we can establish, some kind of relation with you, that we are not telling you just some blah blah, but you have something to work on. And on the other side, I think there are around Europe lots of good examples of good collaboration between, let's say, the public communicators and the journalists. I will just mention one in France. They have this, the third channel is called France 3. It's as a national and regional broadcast in each of the region. And they propose to them, we want to show in a specific region some stories about some people that get some financing from the EU for running their business, doing something. And they create a quite nice format that they propose to the national TV. National TV, they say, why not? We try 1 month. We try 1 month and let's see if it works. They tried, and so they broadcast 20 episode of 1.5 minutes of people that you can really think, okay, this is my friend, this is my uncle, on TV, because this is someone that I can really resonate with. And then the national TV said, please do more, do 3 months. We go for 3 full months before the primetime news, so 7 p.m. in night, quite a lot of audience. And this worked very well. At the end, they ran some kind of survey. There were 20 million, at least, that have seen one of these episodes. 20 million is one third of the French population, more or less. And this, I think, we have collectively, not only in Brussels, not only as a European Commission, but as a lot that we can try to sell to you, and also to gain your attention, and gain your trust. And at the same time, I think the media should be a bit more open, maybe to listen, if when possible.
Yeah. I would like to come back to the question of journalism. I think we have in mind somehow a mechanism of trust when we talk about journalism. There's a mechanism of trust of communication because of professionality, because of this systematic way to do it. We do not have this mechanism of trust in front to social media yet. So that means that we come back to the question of education. And I think, of course, we need education. We have institutions, they are already so much circling around themselves, so they are not really able to react to such an open way and system and let me say, an open way to do the life, and to do the society and communication. So I think, and this is already a strategy of the European Union, building new capacities for education, finding new stakeholders. They are really interested in a functioning mechanism of trust of this society, and this is media, and this is economy, and different institutions, and bring them together in a new capacity corpus in order to take care of a new model of education. And in relation to social media, I think there would be a possibility to build somehow a mechanism of trust. I'm thinking of traffic. We all have driving license, and we know from each other we have it, because so then we can trust everybody, any other one knows what to do in what situation ever. So why don't we think about to develop a social media driving license as a certification to be confronted, to be reflected, and to get knowledge on how social media works, what are the problems and what are the challenges and what are the chances as a broad regional strategy in order to get more trust in a new way to do the society. It will develop, but we should give them somehow more management than it has until now.
So please, Stojan.
I would like to how to say, use your presence and ask you the question that will be raised in the afternoon. You mentioned your experience with the national public broadcaster. You mentioned your experience with national public broadcaster. We were thinking if from each of the macro-regional strategies, there is one partner that will be like leading the story in its region to create a certain amount of audiovisual material in order to show to the other three. Do you think that there will be any interest, because it's insane to go with this to commercial televisions, but we were thinking, do you think from your experience there is enough interest with national public broadcasters to have a kind of exchange program? Because I know it was always the idea and then it's always difficult, but here the amount of the material that is produced, but especially the amount of the countries, member states involved in each of the four, we were just thinking, how do today public broadcasters react to such initiatives? Because I'm pretty sure that in Brussels there will be an interest for this, but the question is whether there will be a channel to distribute it.
Yeah, it's interesting because Thomas mentioned not just information but also education, and I think that the role of national TVs is education. And I'm sure, like Matteo said, these stories, also the national French television presented, that people are interesting, yeah, and they must be made in the format, modern, the format for people, not very serious documentaries and so on. And your question, Stojan, I'm sure that this communication between different national TVs according the macro region information and education is possible. Even sometimes also in this European broadcast TV, we have problems because there are different policies on different TVs. But yeah, actually also on our TV Slovenia, when Matteo sent me this call for proposal, we started to think. And I think I'm always proposing these stories, according to European issues. Even when we enter to European Union, we were presenting the stories of people, and the message was about the European policies and so on. And yeah, actually we are working on this to present some project.
Just one more word.
Yeah.
If I try to expand your experience, then I'm pretty curious. It's not just that just each community watch its own program. It's more the curiosity about the other communities, right? So if this OCTO, in a way, is expanding to 4 regions, there should be this curiosity, and vice versa, I don't know, in the Alps.
Yeah, and also this message we heard that Slovenia could not take care alone about the Adriatic Sea, for example. This is also something, the challenge to do something. So, yeah, maybe some connections will be made. Yes? Okay. So, it's from the audience, some questions? Or?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, please, Mitya. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Mitya Miršol. I am from Slovenia. And I would like to, my question is related to what was said by my dear friend Thomas and also by Rok Hladnik. When you, Thomas, were talking about your 10-year-old project, sorry? I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, young man. Look, I was wondering when you were, I kept somehow remembering how, for example, I was on the boat from Vienna to Bratislava, for example, on the Danube river. And how much can you really do in order to maybe to cooperate with Slovak region next to your Vienna and so on? And how could you also cooperate in exchanging communication and views on certain subjects with Hungarian population next by? And also, more or less the same question is also regarding what Rok Hladnik said about Primorske novice. How much can you really maybe exchange views with localities in on Italian side about, let's say, some European projects that are either being in running either on Slovenian or in Italian side, and maybe being old-fashioned media. Have you been thinking about maybe some kind of supplement maybe in Italian language in your newspaper, and maybe in cooperation with some Italian newspaper having Slovenian supplement on the other side? Thank you.
Thank you, Mitya. Okay, you can take there.
Yeah, in between answer. Thank you very much, Mitya, for this question. It's true. Austria and Slovakia, they are neighbors, and they could not be far from each other than they are. So it means, on the one hand, we still have the border in our head, but maybe there are also other factors why we don't really feel this neighborhood as a treasure. It's more a problem, you know, still to be neighbor to Hungary or to be neighbor to Slovakia. But there would be some projects we should foster better than we do on a European level. For example, as Mirella was talking about this, or she's working with this Danube as a line combining and connecting the countries. So that means we need a symbol for that, which is a symbol for all of those regions and countries, as Danube could be, or the European region could be, or maybe even the old Habsburg Empire as an idea of coming and being together, whatever. We have no symbols for that yet in order to get a new meaning why it makes sense to be neighbor to the other. Even if neighborhood would mean first getting confronted to the other makes me strange to myself. This is a psychological way. It's the complexity, what I was saying before. We have to focus on this complexity. Then Slovakia would be interesting for us, because we are always reducing the complexity. Well, these are somehow whatever. So we don't get really connected to them. We need really a new way of more dialogical communication, less discourse in the sense of just spreading information, data, and facts. We need more meaningful communication in order to get surprised. Surprise is the paradigm of communication. I communicate with someone if I get surprised, knowing now what I did not know before from you, from the topic, and the relation of myself to the topic and to you.
That's a very good question, and I don't think you're going to like the answer that I'm going to give you. We tried with something that we called news exchange with our friends from Primorske Dnevnik and our friends from Glas Istre in Croatia, in Slovenia and Istria. And the funny thing is that we live 10 minutes away from each other. Nobody knows anybody. They don't know themselves. We had to go to a meeting, introduce ourselves and so on. So and it's really funny. And then the second problem we had was that Primorske Dnevnik is an Italian daily newspaper. They're founded by the government, so everything moves very slowly. Their whole focus is to get more funds for their salaries. Well, our focus is to produce attractive stories or articles that will get us readers and subscribers. And regarding your question about having a page or something related to EU projects on a macro-region level, this is the part you're not going to like. It's that those type of news is boring. It's not interesting for our readership. And because like I'm a CEO, I have to watch the profitability of my company. Like we have to do good and whatnot. If not, I'm going to get sacked or something. We produce news that it's attractive and like the readers want to read. So, but the good part of this answer is that we're actually working on a portal called, it's going to be something related to the Adria region. It's going to be in 4 different languages, and it's going to tell stories from like Primorske and a little bit wider in different languages. And this is something that maybe it's going to be a platform for something else.
I heard that Baltic region is very successful in communicating the issues. Can I ask you for some your experience, please? Because we met just before the conference. Yeah, please. Yeah, it's there.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Yes, it's on. Okay, good. My name is Kirsi, and the reason why Barbara is asking me this question is that I represent the Let's Communicate project in the Baltic Sea region, which is the communication point for the strategy. So we work together with the Commission, for example, all the other key stakeholders within the region. And when thinking about communication and macro-regional strategy, it's a tough task, of course, yes. I think Matteo had some excellent examples from our annual forum from last year in Stockholm. But when thinking about the strategy and the added value of it, let's say that I meet someone who hasn't heard anything about our strategy, and I start by saying that, well, we have this macro-regional strategy, and they're like, yet another strategy. So what? So I try to go the other way. I try to tell those great examples, as Matteo did in his opening words here, to tell a story that people can relate to, they can understand and imagine it in some way. But then comes the problem of when do I say the bad word strategy again? Because I have to say it, but because without that, where is the added value of the strategy in this result, in this success story of some cooperation, for example? So it's continuous balancing on the words, on strategy and the good results, and finding the combination. I think that's something that our project is working for continuously, and there's a lot to be done.
Thank you for your experience. Maybe at the beginning we said that we will bring some results. What could be the recipe, how to communicate the macro regions in the future? It's in front of us. What to do?
I have some experience with one of our neighbor country, Poland. For many years, actually, we was like strategic partners in some projects, but it was not very successful. Local politicians in our country, in Poland, they use it for communication and strategic communication, mostly own agenda, own problems, for example, of national minorities in Lithuania or in Poland, and so on, so on, so on. And we as a journalist, and many editors also, and some also scientists and politicians and writers said, look guys, you have your small business discussing with each other, but please speak about important issues in some way which can be more constructive. No way. For many years, we built some platforms on Facebook when we organized meetings. NGOs, journalists, famous people in society, scientists, historical. We was seeking for some new objects to discuss, not for politicians, because European Union level and politicians level in countries is a little bit different, you know, because of many reasons, but not the same like communication between people. And we try to find persons who can be interesting for people, for local people, in Poland and Lithuania, speaking about all these important issues in a little bit different way. Sometimes with some historical context, sometimes with some, controversial issues, but it was people who was not directly related to politicians. because of our experience. We had for many years discussing politicians, but not results. And now we feel also a new kind of communication on social platforms, some forums, also some programs on television involving people from society. And then asking politicians, what is your position about this position, was more successful than the traditional way of journalists. If you heard some story, you call from politicians, what do you think about it? It's a very traditional way we were doing it before. And now we change also style of communication. We don't have for many years platforms for journalists. You was mentioned your countries here. We have like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, close countries, but we had very few projects related to journalists putting together them. Okay, we have some conferences, but not the same, you know. Now we have some investigative journalist projects together with journalists, also some success stories. It means also informal context was built by these informal networks. But these networks was established by journalists and people, not with some support from somewhere. Sometimes it sells even more than support with finances and so on from somewhere. But for that, we needed some also bad experience for some long period. Why we don't do this and this projects? We are like very slow, you know. And now we have some progress actually. It means the question related not only to politicians, to organizations, but also for society, for people living, also journalists, editors, especially editors actually. I would like to mention editors-in-chiefs and editors. The role of journalists usually are discussed by many people in conferences, but role of editors as a key persons in editorial, it's even more important, I guess. Because journalists are mentioned by everyone, but editors not so.
So we must educate also editors, huh? This is also one challenge. Yeah. But still, I'm very, maybe too practical, some recipes how to communicate from you now that we come to the end of our discussion. Maybe Thomas.
Thank you. Well, what we really need is to manage somehow the frameworks we are working with. It's very important. The first way we have to, the first step we have to do, find a framework or a common frame in order to find out what is the region, for example, region or the society I'm living with. And the more it is transcultural, the better it is, I think, because we are living in a society that makes us aware of other people, of other cultures, of other languages, and this attracts as well, as long as we have the possibility to be confronted them with ourselves. So identity is not just something we should look for ourselves. First, we should look to the other in order to understand what we mean to any other. And I think this could be a good model for developing areas by working together. And if you ask me for a concrete thing, I really would say we should develop a common project in order to learn to use social media as a means for doing this society and not drifting away from this society. So that means, of course, we have to redefine the meaning of an institution or organization or communities we have already. We should not neglect what's going on. We should not wait until the young generation is really doing their own social way or their own society. We need to bring them into our interest and not saying you should do what we do. We want to understand what is your understanding of your future and your life, and we try to give you somehow the facilities for coming along with that.
Mirella, you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. I think what we also need is having like a public relation of the European Union, just to show what European Union had made such successful and great things. There are many. I just can talk, of course, now only about Bosnia-Herzegovina. There are so many things that they have mentioned, like there is a group of old ladies who are knitting on the traditional way, and then they support them, and it will be sold. And it's also supported by European Union, you know. And the old ladies, they don't feel lost, even of the Europe, you know, like many young people, for example. They beware that old tradition. And I think we just need one public relation, which you can find on one place where you can get all the stories and spread them to the media houses. And I think what's the other one thinking, you know, on every website, every newspaper, you have different sections. If I have My Germany, why don't we have My Europe, where we can spread all these beautiful stories, you know? Just to have it in the mind, you don't live only in Germany, you live in the European Union, which is very versatile, you know, and we have to take care of it.
And have also opportunities from that.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Matteo, please.
I don't have a receipt on the media side. Probably also not on our side, but maybe I have some ideas more on, let's say, on our side as a public institution. I think, as Dana said, first of all, is prioritize communication. So this is the decision maker should do this, and especially macro-regional strategy should have, of course, communication strategy, should have communication people that are fully established and work on this, like our friend in the Baltic Sea region, that they are doing this, they are professional doing this, hopefully full-time now, I don't know, but okay. So having resources, having staff, having budget, create this structure that are, this is the real basic, if we want to try to then to liaise with you as a media and to try to have a collaboration with this. But also, I think macro-regional strategy, they have an extra challenge because they cover several countries, and as I don't think there is like a European or macro-regional public opinion, so we cannot say something and the people will react. So we have to pass through the national audience, and pass through the national audience we can just do through the media. Okay, we can use, of course, social media, trying like this, but no one has the reach and the authority to speak to the national public as the media does. So I think on the one side, more professionalization from like for a public communicator. On the other side, try to rely more on you, involve more you in like all this media program that we have in the forum and all the things, and provide you more information. This is my 2 cents.
Rok, maybe for the...
It's a hard question that has no answer right now. It's the short version of my answer, but I think it's really important. It's not to forget about the information that does not have a market. And what I'm trying to say is that like media houses are going to pick the information that has market, despite being it like whatever it is, because it's going to attract a lot of readers. But I think that the whole story of the European Union, it's a bigger picture and has more to tell than just, oh, we build you a road or we finance this or with this. It's like, it's a bigger project. And those type of information and communication usually doesn't have a market, and it's really important not to forget about that. And I think that actually government or like national televisions and other media have a very important role to play in there, because you're the only one, or should be the only one, who don't pay that much attention to what's readable, what has a lot of attraction, but more focused on the content itself and the story that the content want to give. And this is maybe something that a lot of, including, I think, our national TV has to understand its focus on what it should be. So this is one part of the story that shouldn't be forgotten. Well, as the answer, I think we have to, the complex of the European Union on one side and the complex of communicating the European Union on different platforms. There's just not one simple key that's going to open the door. It's going to be a lot of keys coming from different areas and different generations and different ways of telling the same story.
Yes, Stojan, please.
Paradoxically, it will be close to what Rok was saying, but from different perspective. I wanted to give a recipe that sometimes it's even enough just to change the time schedule. And I give you an example of a big infrastructure project we had in Pristina. It was Palace of Justice. The usual way would be to call for the launching of the construction and for the opening. But if you reflect a little bit, they're both empty. You know, so there's like empty space or something is going, there is nothing to show. And when it is the opening of the building, again, the building is empty. So just by moving, you know, that you go into the construction phase and you go into the working phase of the already built, you got to content. You got the content of, look, something is building where there was nothing because it was literally land. And later, look, there's something going on in this empty room. So I'm not a fan of infrastructure, but I'm giving this example as a processual thing. The moment you cut into a process in a little bit different frame, there is completely different content. And I think this is sometimes that is needed by all these pattern and standards. It's just, you know, jump a little bit in time, ahead or forward, and you are already with content.
It's maybe some questions from the audience at the end.
Maybe some comments?
Yeah, please.
I'm covering the cross-border program between Slovenia and Croatia, and when we discuss about the stories, we have hundreds of the project implemented in Slovenia, Croatia. 75 million spent. A lot of people work together. They have a huge understanding between each other. So they know that they cannot solve any problems if they're doing only in one side of the border. So a lot of material for you, but somehow it doesn't come to the media. But opposite, if somebody says something which share mistrust between the people, somehow you should ignore them and maybe much more work on good cases. We have a lot of good cases in cross-border program with Slovenia and Croatia, Slovenia and Italy. That's my comment. Maybe you should ignore the statement which share untrust and more focus on the good example.
Thank you for your comment. Yeah, please.
I think I have a decent answer to your question, and it's related to what Stojan said before. I think that just showing a road was built, that's it. It's no story. But showing how the road was built, what was happening there, what was the procedure to get there, is the story. So I think it's a bad thing for our media or like news reporters or whatever, that we're just reporting news instead of telling the story. Because we have a lot of a good story, like you said, across the borders. Istria is a very good example for it, a beautiful example. But we don't tell stories, we just news reporting. And I think that's the wrong approach for such things.
So we came back to telling stories when we began. Yes. So, yeah, I can just say at the end that, yeah, maybe I can see also from our discussion that the role of national TVs are quite important, but I still think in combination. Also, the public TV must develop the social media, like Thomas said, and I'm sure then storytelling is still a future, and also in networking. Like Stojan said, to link some ideas with different TVs. Yeah, so we have a lot of work, like our colleagues from Baltic region said. So it was really, I'm honored that I was here with you in this discussion. We are all growing in communication, I think. Thank you very much, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. I think it was extremely interesting and really focusing us to the afternoon session where we will touch the 4 concrete examples of the communication strategies of the 4 macro-regional strategies. I need to mention the name strategy, yes. And no, I need to say this. Sorry, those who don't know me, but I need to have that. I cannot keep my mouth shut something. I need to congratulate you for an extremely, let's say, interesting debate. And we have the indicator, which is very rarely fulfilled. The minister stayed with us the whole part.